All right, today we're getting into the really dark and twisted story of Mohammad Shahabuddin. This is a guy who was literally a lawmaker in India's parliament, while at the same time he was breaking almost every law you can think of. It's a pretty chilling look at what happens when crime and politics get all mixed up. So just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, let's start with one number, 40. That's about how many criminal charges Shahabuddin had against him. And these weren't for small things. We are talking about extortion, kidnapping, and yes, multiple counts of murder. That number right there, it tells you we're dealing with someone on a whole different level of notorious. So here's how we're going to unpack all this. First, we'll go back to his early days as a criminal. Then we'll look at his unbelievable rise into politics. After that, we'll see the reign of terror he created, talk about the incredible bravery of the people who spoke out, and finally, see how the wheels of justice, even though they turned slowly, eventually caught up with him.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning. We're in Siwan, in Bihar, a place where politics could get incredibly violent. This is where a young Shahabuddin started making a name for himself, not in college, but in police records.
By the time he was just 19 years old, the police had already slapped him with a pretty serious label, an A-category criminal. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's not a tag they just hand out. It's reserved for people whose crimes are so organized and dangerous that they're considered a major threat to the entire community. He was basically a professional criminal before he was even old enough to run for parliament. And get this, from the very start, his crimes were tangled up in politics. His first official case was for going after his political rivals, specifically a left-wing party. So this wasn't just random chaos. It was strategic violence used to fight the brutal power struggles in the area. It was his way of building a reputation built on pure fear. All right, so he's a known criminal. But what happens next is where this story takes a truly disturbing turn. Let's look at how he didn't just get away with his crimes. He actually became a lawmaker himself. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's kind of staggering when you see it laid out. In '86, he's got a criminal case. Just 4 years later, he wins his first election. And by 1996, he is sitting in the national parliament, representing the very district he was terrorizing. He kept winning, too, 4 times in a row, and with every victory, his grip on power got tighter and tighter. And this right here, this really gets to the heart of it all. The two faces of Mohammad Shahabuddin. On one hand, you had the public politician. The charismatic guy at rallies, the 4-time member of parliament. But behind closed doors, he was the crime boss, running an empire built on fear, extortion, and murder. It was this bizarre double life that let him get away with it for so long. So what did all this power actually look like for the people on the ground in Siwan? Well, this next part is about the brutal reality of living in a district that was essentially held hostage by one man. The list of crimes is it's like a textbook for organized crime. It's not just murder and kidnapping in general. We're talking about specific, infamous acts, like bombing a rival's political office or the kidnapping of a businessman named Chode Lal Gupta, who was taken and then just never seen again. Every one of these acts just added to his fearsome reputation. But maybe nothing shows his absolute brutality more than the double murder in 2004. It was just so cold and methodical. Step 1, make an extortion demand. Step 2, the 2 brothers refused to pay. Step 3, they were doused in acid. And as if that wasn't horrific enough, Step 4, they were then shot and killed. This sent a terrifying message to everyone. If you resist, you die. But even in all this darkness, some people found the courage to fight back. And that brings us to the heroes of this story, the ordinary folks who, at incredible risk to themselves, decided they would not stay silent. The price for speaking out against him was terrifyingly high. People like Sheetal Paswan showed unbelievable courage just by agreeing to testify. But so many others paid the ultimate price. Rajiv Roshan, who was the main eyewitness to that horrifying acid attack, he was murdered just 3 days before he was scheduled to take the stand. A journalist named Rajdio Ranjan, who wrote about his crimes, was also assassinated. This was a systematic campaign to eliminate anyone who dared to challenge his power. The situation got so bad that India's Supreme Court actually had to step in. They realized that there was no way to get a fair trial in Bihar, where his influence was just absolute, so the court ordered his cases to be moved out of the state all the way to Delhi and took special steps to protect the few brave witnesses who were left. It was a huge deal, basically the highest court in the country admitting the local system was completely broken. And that court intervention really marks the beginning of the end. So for our last chapter, let's look at the slow, difficult process of the law finally catching up to a man who thought he was untouchable. His downfall really starts in 2005 when he's arrested. And the irony is he's arrested at his official Member of Parliament residence in Delhi. The convictions start coming in, including a life sentence in 2007. He actually got out on bail for a short time in 2016, but the Supreme Court quickly shut that down. He was then moved to the famous high-security Tihar jail in Delhi, and that's where he stayed until he died from COVID-19 in 2021. And yeah, the convictions really started to pile up. He was found guilty of attempting to murder a police superintendent, and he got life in prison for both the 1999 kidnapping and the horrific 2004 double murder. With multiple life sentences, the walls had finally officially closed in on him. But here's a crucial point. Even being locked up didn't completely stop him. There were constant reports that he was still running his criminal network from inside his prison cell, passing messages and giving orders through his people on the outside. His influence was just that deep. So in the end, Shahabuddin's story is a really grim reminder of what can happen when power goes completely unchecked and the line between politics and crime just disappears. But it's also a story about the resilience of justice. It shows that with enough courage from ordinary people, even the most powerful figures can be held accountable. And it all leaves us with this one big question to think about. When crime and politics become one and the same, what is the real, ultimate cost of getting justice back? For the people who lived through it in Saskatchewan, that price was paid over decades, with fear and with far too many lost lives.